Let's dive into our conversation. So
Yeah,
I
sounds
will
good.
introduce Chris shortly, and then we'll dive into some questions. So Chris is a two-time CSU graduate, having first graduated in 2016 with a degree in Spanish and minor in business, then returning in 2018 to take part of the GSSE MBA,
What
which is
insurance
now
can I do?
Impact MBA program,
I am
and then
legitimately
graduated in
gonna do this.
2019. And Chris describes himself as jack of all trades, given his unique background, having worked as a wedding DJ, mutual fund tax accountant, CFO for a bread distilling operation, and ultimately landing as a senior supply chain consultant with Blue Horseshoe, part of Accenture. Chris has now been with Blue Horseshoe, part of Accenture, for about 4 years since his graduation from the MBA program and has completed numerous ERP implementations for clients spanning the globe that have even obtained international recognition. So once again, Chris, thank you so much for joining us on this Tuesday.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure. On this Halloween, right?
On this Halloween Tuesday. So our first question is if you could just please tell us a little bit about yourself
Sure.
and your career and industry, and then steps
Yep.
that you've taken to get where you are now.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. You kind of went into a little bit with my background, but yeah, I'm actually a Colorado native. Ended up going to obviously CSU for my undergraduate degree. I was a Spanish major and a business minor. Funny enough, I always knew I was going to be a Spanish major. Always had a passion for that, just didn't know what else I was going to do with it. So I landed on getting a business minor, and that's kind of off it went. Following graduation has been kind of an interesting path for myself to say the least. So graduated in 2016. Kind of had the typical a little bit of tough time trying to figure out what the next path was, figuring out what the kind of navigating the job market and everything like that. So yeah, I ended up working as a wedding DJ for a friend. He owns a company. Actually got great experience with that, doing, presenting in front of upwards of 350 people at weddings and doing things like that, which was great. Ultimately, in 2017, I ended up with a company called Alps in downtown Denver, working with mutual funds. So basically, if you were to, call and try to talk to someone about your mutual funds, you wanted to make a transaction or find out a little bit more information about the mutual funds, you probably would have gotten me on the phone. So, and I did that for about a year before moving into the tax department, where I was actually completing the IRS forms for mutual funds. And yes, that is as riveting as it sounds. So yeah, I mean, ultimately that led to me, I kind of just saw a couple paths for myself from there. It was either going to be CPA or kind of like CFA path going forward. And just for me, that's not really where I saw myself going, not seeing a ton of passion from that side of things. So ultimately, yeah, I decided to rip the Band-Aid off, come back to school and do a full-time MBA program. And I just want to let everyone know, if you think, you have no money in undergrad, that's true. But once you go from making a little bit of money and then deciding to go full-time back to school, it's even worse. So so I did that. It was totally worth it. Did a full on-campus program with the GSSE, now Impact MBA program. Really enjoyed various aspects of that, one of which being the capstone project, where we had to create our own business venture. I don't know how much time we'll have about it, but I'm happy to talk to anyone about that venture. We actually worked with the Food Bank of the Rockies and used leftover baked goods to create our own alcoholic spirit. Worked with Copper Muse Distillery in Fort Collins. So that was a really cool project that we were able to do, keep, kind of focusing on limiting food waste and things like that. So ended up being a great project. And then that's actually where I met Blue Horseshoe at I think it was a management event actually through the College of Business. And I met Steve Meck there. We hit it off, and it went from there basically. So that's how I am where I am today. In terms of what I'm doing, yeah, I'm a supply chain consultant, functional warehousing lead specifically. within Microsoft Dynamics 365. For those of you that aren't aware, that's an ERP or enterprise resource planning system. Basically, it keeps all of your purchase orders, sales orders, inventory, demand forecasting, lots of different things that you could think of within one system, right? Just kind of keeps it all nice and neat so that you're not looking at a bunch of different areas. Get us away from the world of Excel spreadsheets, right? Have something a little more intelligent and organized than that, right? So that's what I do. And from a day-to-day basis, yeah, a lot of my day really consists of, speaking with clients that I'm working with. So I'll have meetings where, my job as the functional consultant, really, I'm trying to know their business and their business processes to the best of my ability, almost as well as them, which isn't always possible, but that's my aim anytime I kind of head into a project. And yeah, it's a lot of solutioning sessions, tell me about how your business handles receiving inventory into the warehouse. What does that look like? Tell me about your specific rules. Do you have, maybe you have refrigerated goods that need to go to a specific refrigerated section and things like that. So there will be a combination of understanding their business processes combined with me actually making configurations and actions within the system to apply that logic, right? So that's most of it. Lots of status updates, lots of syncing up with the project team where the various stakeholders at and everything like that. So that's kind of in a nutshell.
Nice. Well, you just described a little bit about what your typical day might look like.
Yep.
Getting into this field, since this wasn't your direct,
Yeah.
career plan, it sounds like.
Sure. Yeah.
What makes this role that you're in right now a good fit for you, and how might a student know that this also might be a good fit for them?
Yeah. So specifically on my side as like a functional consultant, right, where I need to understand business processes. And, I think inherently my background, you said it in my bio of like the jack of all trades aspect, right? Being able to understand how different process areas within a business operate is really helpful. So understanding some financial impacts that leads to a certain level of receiving inventory and selling goods and things like that, how that ties into potentially sales, marketing, customer service, all these various aspects of the business is extremely helpful. And given I've kind of had this unique blend of experience going back into, honestly, when I was an undergraduate student, I actually had social media marketing internship with the athletics department. I did a sales internship between my junior and senior years. So having kind of this eclectic background actually really helps. And then, yeah, I mean, just being able to understand business and what they're trying to do at the end of the day is really helpful, right? Like, especially from a warehousing and supply chain perspective, like we want goods leaving the warehouse and understanding that is really key. And then honestly, like I think to an extent you really do have to like in interacting with people and being able to interact with a diverse group of people, right? I literally have gone from speaking to a CIO or director of logistics, right? And then turned around, gone onto the warehouse floor, and I'm speaking with hourly warehouse workers, right? And being able to understand the way that you need to communicate to get the best outcome, depending on what you're trying to achieve in that moment, it's a nuanced dance, right? And being able to navigate that and learn that, it's a skill that kind of takes some time. But I would say if anyone finds themselves with an ability that they feel confident of communicating with a wide variety of people, kind of regardless of who they are, knowing how to tailor the message to your audience, that's a unique skill and would definitely serve you well if you ended up in this sort of career path. So
Awesome. Thank you.
sure.
One more question before I open it up for students to ask some. Can you describe what your field or industry looks like for someone that's just getting started in their career? And what recommendations might you have for a student to kind of set themselves apart?
Yeah. My field is a little interesting, right? Because it's like consulting, tech, supply chain. Like we don't inherently have a field, right? Like we work with clients that are apparel to food and beverage to manufacturing to, you name it. And we've probably worked with a certain client that kind of falls into that area, right? So what's unique about this is I think I would have my eyes wide open to what is the world of consulting, right? So being aware of what billable hours means and potential travel and the interaction with the clients, and what's really cool about it, like you get all these various projects for different amounts of time. You can be working with different project teams. So understanding, I guess, the nuance and the aspect related to like project management is definitely something to be aware of. Understanding a little bit of the field of consulting would be really important. So just understanding the dynamics of that relationship. Obviously, lots of things are contract bound. What is the statement of work saying? How are we going to work for this client? Where does our scope start? Where does their scope end? Navigating those things is good to be aware of. But then in terms of like the specific, if you're looking at the world of ERP and supply chain, right? Since that's probably a lot of this audience, I would say if you are going into a supply chain job, you're not going to get away from ERP. Like you're probably going to be using one maybe daily, regardless if that's Microsoft, if that's SAP, if that's NetSuite. Like you're probably going to be using one of those. And yeah, I mean, any experience you can open yourselves up to any sort of software like that, especially while you're an undergrad, would be fantastic, right? So if you do get the chance to get some, at least even if it's limited exposure to like an ERP or even something different, right? Like a CRM, so customer relationship management software. Most people know Salesforce, like something like that, or PLM, product lifecycle management software. Any of those things, just some like good exposure is really good. And then that combined with the last aspect of me being like a warehousing supply chain person specifically, get into warehouses. Like that's the best thing I can tell you. If you can get real world experience getting in a warehouse, understanding that there's multiple receiving docks, multiple shipping docks, knowing what racking looks like, knowing what some of the cool automation and technology in warehouses are too, as that becomes more and more present. It's definitely just going to make you seem like where the industry is going. So
Nice. And I know that you entered with your MBA. So for
yeah,
some of our undergraduate students that may be looking for like entry level positions
sure.
into the industry, what might those entry level positions kind of look like?
Yeah, I'll speak just specifically for like what that looks like with Accenture.
Yeah.
We have positions that I basically started at a similar position that anyone else would have, even with my MBA. Maybe I'd say it was fast tracked a bit, but in terms of like that initial aspect, yeah, you basically you come in, you would be designated as a consultant. Maybe you preface some sort of interest within D365 or could be NetSuite or something else. You probably put some preface into, maybe you're more prone to the warehousing side, maybe transportation, maybe trade and logistics a little bit. There's some nuance there. But yeah, you go through the same training that any of us really go to. And you'd start off probably as like a second or a third on a project. Candidly, it's probably going to be a lot of work that can be a bit tedious at times. But honestly, that's the best way to learn it. Exposure and doing it 5,000 times makes you know it that much better. And having then the confidence after doing that 5,000 times, you will get to a point that you're going to be the lead and you need to be that confident. Like I said, you're going to be talking with a CIO of a company. I got to the point that I had a relationship that he was calling me on my cell phone, right? And he's like, hey, the system's not doing what it's supposed to do. So getting to the point that you're confident and able to express that is really important. So, and it moves quick. Like, some people feel like they are kind of going slow. Maybe they're just in that spot for about 6 months to 12 months. And I can tell you, numerous people at 12 months, all of a sudden they find themselves as a lead and they're like, whoa, how did this happen? And you go through the cycles, imposter syndrome, all that good stuff. But we have a really good, specifically at Blue Horseshoe Accenture, we have a really good network. Like we have mentors built in, everything like that. So
That's awesome. We have about 10 minutes left, students. So if you do have questions, please don't hesitate to put those in the chat. While I'm waiting for questions, I will keep moving ahead with questions for Chris. But again, students, if you have questions, please pop them in and I will I'll get to those questions with Chris. So another question for you, Chris, what challenges or trends have you seen in your industry that would be helpful to be aware of for students?
Yeah. I'm going to go back just a couple years. I mean, everything related to COVID, right? I mean, how many of you were familiar with maybe you'd place an order for something online and the forecast was like, hey, yeah, exactly. And you'd wait. Oh, it may be there in 8 weeks. It may be there tomorrow. It may be there and whatever, right? And no one knows. And a good part of that was like the actual logistics. Things were moving a lot slower because of freight, because of shipping, like all that stuff, right? There was also a large amount of lack of visibility into customers' own, supply chains. They didn't know where things were. They didn't have the visibility. So the transformation of the market to visibility and needing more advanced ERPs, more advanced demand forecasting, more advanced all of that stuff is becoming more and more prevalent. I mean, the days of Excel spreadsheets, like we still see them, but they are few and far between, and you just can't stay there anymore. Not only that, but like then integrating it even further, right? With like your e-commerce platform, integrating it with like, other potential systems like CRM, PLM, and, various other ones. And then, I mean, some are going even the next step with automation. Typically, what that looks like in our industry and where we're starting to see is machine handling, right? So conveyor belts, ASRS machines, so like automated retrieval, some bots for just like picking and shipping, packing is starting to become more prevalent for like basically very homogenous items that are all same size, same shape, being packed into the same, sort of box. We're seeing more of that too. I would say it's not quite as widespread as what I think maybe people are thinking, just because there's a huge capital investment piece of it, but people are asking about it. They want to get there. So, I mean, companies are starting to put that in their plans for the next 3 to 5 years, right? So it may not be happening today if they're not on it, but like they're asking the question, they're wanting to get there, they're wanting to start putting that plan in their budgets for the future. So
awesome, super interesting, and I'm sure every day is a little different too, especially post-COVID.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, Chris, can I jump in with a question?
Sure.
Because, understand you talked some about kind of the supply chain part of what you do. Obviously, that's what you do. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, can you talk a little more about the consulting side of what you do? I know you do consulting with supply chain, but how often are you changing the different customers? What does that look like?
Sure. Yeah. That's a great question, Sean. So it really depends on the individual and kind of what we have from a sales pipeline perspective and what the individual has capacity to do. We're more or less premised on trying to build in 40 billable hours for each resource, right? Sometimes that fluctuates, maybe 35 to 40 hours, but we try to aim for 40 billable client-facing hours every week, right? So maybe that's one client because you're the lead on the project and you handle all aspects of things and you're doing everything like that. Or it could be composed of, 2, 3, 4 clients, depending what your role is there, right? So there's kind of that aspect to it. And then in terms of like how often are we switching projects, I just finished a project that I was working on for over 2 years, which is extremely rare in the industry. I was working with them from August of 2021 until, we more or less wrapped up in September. So, and that's with 4 go lives across 3 different countries. And I actually spent a month in Australia and a month in New Zealand with them. So there is opportunity there. If folks like traveling, consulting does have a travel component to it. With COVID, that has changed a little bit. It's very much more milestone driven of the project, right? So there are different phases of a project normally of like, all right, here's the initial requirements gathering and kickoff. Let's get to know everyone. Let's understand your business. And then there will be various like testing points throughout the project until the point that we decide to turn the new system on for them, right? So yeah, so it's consulting is kind of this nebulous concept that people aren't always sure of, but I definitely liken it to like project management side of things. You may be working with a different project team every single project. I would say odds are you probably are. You may work with someone a couple times, but typically it's a rotating kind of situation, just depending again who's available, what projects are they already on, who has capacity, all that stuff. So
Hey, can I ask one more question? Because
Sure.
you're in a really unique position. I think that we have a lot of students who are trying to figure out which direction they want to go career
Sure.
wise, or kind of what type of company. You
Yeah.
started with a fairly smaller company, 300 people.
Right.
This was Blue
Yeah.
Horseshoe.
Yep.
Then now they were acquired by Accenture, which is
Yep.
700,000, 800,000 people around the
Something in
country.
there. Yep.
Yeah, so you went from small company
Yeah.
to large company. I know a lot of our students are trying to think of like, oh, do I want a big company? Do I want a small company?
Yeah.
I'm not asking for any dirt on anything, obviously. I don't
Sure.
know, challenges, interests.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts? Any thoughts about
Mm.
the differences between a small or big company?
Yeah, I think pros and cons for sure for both sides. I don't even want to say cons, but just like differences. Smaller company, a lot more flexibility, a lot more agile if we're going to use projects, methodology kind of talking. A lot more willing to um, kind of, move things on the fly. Like with Blue Horseshoe, if we had some good relationships with clients, we would be a little bit more willing and able to adjust on the fly, right? Hey, the project's not quite going as planned. We need to adjust the timeline. We need to do this. We need to do this. We need to pull more resources in. We need to bring more resources off. We had a little bit more flexibility. That's not gone, I would say, as part of Accenture, but typically that's that in Blue Horseshoe world that might be a single call, and we all just get together and make that decision, right? With Accenture as part of a bigger company, like we may have to bring legal in, we may have to change like the contracts, we may have to do a lot more of that side of things, right? So that's probably one of the biggest observable differences. One of the other big differences that we didn't have at all as part of Blue Horseshoe is the use of offshore resources. So there's a lot more flexibility from being able to support clients from like a 24/7 perspective, right? Like we have tons of resources in India and the Philippines and all over the globe, in Europe and everywhere. In Blue Horseshoe, that was not the case, which is great. There's also though an aspect of you have to take more and build it into the project of having onshore resources be able to get those resources up to speed, make sure everyone's talking about the same thing, understanding the processes, and doing more of that, right? So I think that's a tremendous positive, being able to resource this huge network. And then probably the last thing would just be like, we have more ability to engage in more projects as part of Accenture, right? Like it's a huge network. We have a huge team. We can get a project and we can have consultants implement CRM, PLM, and ERP all under one project. With Blue Horseshoe, that would never happen, right? We just didn't have the capacity for that. So,
Very cool.
Thank you.
yeah.
Students, this is your last chance to ask a question as we are nearing our last few minutes. So if you think of any burning questions, please feel free and put them in the chat. And I will ask Chris one last question here as we kind of wrap up. What is one last piece of advice that you would give our students listening today? That could be just general advice for our students or for trying to get into the field as well.
Sure. It's a great question. I think the biggest thing is don't limit yourself. I think a lot of times we do that of saying, oh, I'm not qualified for that job. I'm not in a position to do that internship. I can't, I don't have the prerequisites to take that class I really want to, oh, I can't make study abroad work, something like that, right? just try to do it. Don't limit yourself. Go ahead and apply or take a stab, reach out to the teacher. Odds are if you're a good student and you make a good case, they may waive some of it for you, right? To give you that experience. So, go ahead and take that. The biggest thing is getting, I think people don't advocate for this enough. World and life experience can be just as valuable as career experience. And people don't recognize that as much. So if you get the opportunity to experience different things, just take it and see where it goes. You never know.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much for being with us today and taking time to impart your knowledge with our students. We really appreciate it. Students, one more reminder, and Sean put the link in the chat, that we do have some more supply chain events going on this week to gain some more experience. So please check out some of our other events that we have coming up. And thank you again, and we hope to see you all soon. Bye.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. I'm gonna pop over. Bye, Hayden.